What's up, guys? This is Don Locks MMA here to present the UFC 294 weigh-in show, where I break down how each fighter looked on the scale, how they sized up against each other during the ceremonial weigh-ins, and what that all means from a betting perspective. This video is presented by the MMA Minute, your one-stop shop for sports betting content. So if you haven't already, please make sure to leave us a like and a follow. This is the third show of a series that I'll be doing every Friday. And without further ado, let's get into the first fight of the night, Shara Magomedov versus Bruno Silva. As you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, I have the ceremonial weigh-ins running where I'm going to analyze how each fighter matched up and also comment on how they looked during the weigh-ins. I think Bruno Silva had a pretty solid cut, but he looked a little bit sucked out on the scales. But as you can see in that video, he rehydrated really well and looks absolutely jacked at the weigh-ins. Shara Magomedov also had a pretty flawless cut. He looked great on the scales, not sucked out at all. It's a really good division for him. And as you can see, he also rehydrated well. These two are about to match up and stand next to each other. I think if anyone has the size advantage, it's going to be Shara here. This is going to be an all-out striking war. I don't think we're going to see much grappling. So the range and being the taller man might help out here for Shara. For our next fight of the night, we have Jinh Frey going against Dudakova. This was a really tough cut for Dudakova. She ended up missing weight by 0.6 pounds, and I'm worried here that this might affect her late into the fight, but my overall read on this fight is that she's an early finisher, and hopefully cardio will not be a factor as she has Jinh Frey covered everywhere. Jinh Frey is very jacked for a women's fighter, and she has been doing this for a long time, but I just don't think she has the skills to keep up with Dudakova. Overall, these two size up pretty well against each other. If anything, Dudakova has a little bit of a height advantage. But in terms of the thickness advantage and the strength, that might go to Jinh Frey. Overall, I see Dudakova getting the first or second round finish via submission. And I'm not too worried as she rehydrated pretty well and does look very, very jacked on the scales. I'm going to give it a second for these two to match up so everyone can see how they sized up against each other. For our next fight of the night, we have Mohamad Naimov going against Nathaniel Wood. This was a flawless cut by Naimov. He didn't look like he was sucked out at all. This is a really good weight class for him. Doesn't look like he's cutting too much weight, and he looked absolutely jacked on the scales. In terms of Nathaniel Wood, this looked like a little bit of a stressful cut for him based on his body language at the weigh-in. But overall, I think he looks fine. He rehydrated well at the weigh-in for the ceremonials. And matching up, these two have a pretty equal size and it's pretty equal frame. If anything, I think that Nathaniel Wood could have a tiny bit of a size advantage in terms of the thickness. But overall, you can see they're the exact same height and they're very evenly matched up. In our next fight of the night, we have Jubli going against Breeden. Jubli looked great on the scales and he looks absolutely fired up at these ceremonial weigh-ins. He's a professional. I don't think he's ever going to be missing weight. Breeden, on the other hand, is an absolute joke. He missed by 4 pounds and wasn't even breaking a sweat on the scales, and that's a horrible sign. That means that he really didn't even try to make the weight, and he probably will look to be cut right after this matchup for missing that big. Respect to Jubli for taking this matchup. Breeden might have a little bit of a size advantage, just like last week with Christian Rodriguez missing by 5 pounds, and that definitely served him well late in the fight. But overall, I don't think Breeden's that guy to really fraud check Jubli at all. If you see anything, Jubli does have the height advantage here as he's crouching down and still the same size as Breeden. I like Jubli in this matchup. I think Breeden's an absolute can. For our next fight of the night, we have Sedriques Dumas going against Azaitar. Dumas had a very easy-looking cut at the weigh-ins, as did Azaitar. I think these two match up very interesting as Azaitar is the much, much thicker, much stockier fighter, and Dumas is very lengthy and tall. Azaitar is one of the weirdest body shapes I've honestly seen in all of the UFC. Interesting to see how this works when he attempts to take down Dumas. As you can see here, Dumas is the much taller fighter. He has much longer arms, but overall, these were very easy cuts for both men, and I don't see any read or any betting perspective here from the weigh-ins. In our next fight of the night, we have Victor Henry going against Javid Basharat. Henry, very solid weigh-in. He's a professional. Looked a little bit drained on the scale, but overall, I think it was a very decent cut for him and nothing to be worried about, as his cardio usually stands up in that third round. Basharat, on the other hand, looked even more sucked out than Henry on the scale, but we've seen this guy look like that every single time. He's a really, really large bantamweight for the division. And I'm definitely not worried about his cut at all. As these two match up in terms of size, I like to note how short Basharat's arms are in terms of the range for striking. As you can see, Henry has the longer arms. Basharat has the height advantage, though. Overall, Basharat is the bigger and more physically imposing fighter. But in terms of range, I do like Henry there. So that's my read on the weigh-in for that one. For our next fight of the night, this is one I definitely want to talk a lot about. We have Trevor Peak going against Mohamad Yahya. Trevor Peak looked absolutely jacked on the scales. He's a really, really thick lightweight, and his cut was amazing. He didn't look like he cut too much weight. His face wasn't sucked out at all. And that's important for someone who doesn't have that good of cardio when he's getting beat up. Mohamad Yahya, on the other hand, this is who I want to touch on. He looked absolutely horrible during the weigh-ins, had no energy, tried to put a flex in the air, put his hand in the air to show he was all right, as he does right here. But it didn't even look like he rehydrated well. He's shaking his head. He looks tired at these weigh-ins. He looks not intense at the face-off. So I'm definitely worried about him, as I liked him to find the KO as a counter striker in this matchup. But he looked sucked out. He didn't look like he rehydrated well at all. And it definitely makes me nervous for him going into this fight that's going to be extremely high-paced. In our next fight of the night, we have Mokaev going against Tim Elliott. Mokaev did have to use the box of shame here to weigh in, but I'm not concerned, as he looked full of energy and with a smile on his face during the weigh-ins. As you can see, he rehydrated really well. He ran up the steps. Here, Tim Elliott also rehydrated well, but he is on the older side, and I am worried about his cardio late in this matchup. As you get towards those 35, 36 ranges of flyweight, your cardio starts to drop off a hill. He motions that Mokaev is a little boy, and this is an intense face-off while Mokaev's blowing him kisses. So I'm really excited for this fight, and I'm looking for violence in this fight. I think these guys match up really well against each other. I think that if anyone's a little bit thicker, it's going to be Elliot, but overall the speed is going to be on Mokaev's side, and I don't see a necessarily great read on the weigh-in. Moving on to the main card, we have Muin Gafurov going against Said Nurmagomedov. This was a solid cut for Gafurov. He looked a little bit off balance on the scales, but he's not a guy who holds that much muscle, so I couldn't imagine a cut being so difficult for him. Said Nurmagomedov does struggle on the scales occasionally, but I was really happy with the way he looked today. He looks filled and didn't look like too sucked out on the face at all. As you can see, he's absolutely jacked right here. When these two match up, I do see a bit of a size advantage for Said, being on the height and the thickness and overall the muscle. Said's the side I really favor in this matchup. I'm not sure why Said's only a -200 favorite. I know that he's not proven to have the greatest gas tank into the third round, but overall I think he's a much better fighter than Gafurov, and he looked bigger on the scale, so that's a plus sign for me. In the next fight of the night, we have Warlley Alves going against Ikram Aliskerov. Warlley Alves is moving up to middleweight for this matchup. As you can see, he didn't cut much weight. He looks a little bit soft on the body, but who knows, as his cardio hasn't been great in the last two fights, this could be a good thing for him, as the weight cut might have been too much for his old age. But overall, he's still a sizable 185er. Ikram, on the other hand, looked a little bit drained during the cut. He doesn't carry that much muscle either. He's kind of a softer middleweight as well, but I'm happy to see that he rehydrated decent. And when these two match up, I think they match up completely even. No one seems to have any size advantage here. If anything, Ikram is a little bit thicker than him, but these two match up great, and the only one who didn't have a great weigh-in would be Ikram. Moving on to the next fight of the night, we have Johnny Walker going against Magomedov Ankalaev. Walker looked extremely jacked on the scale. He's one of the biggest 205ers who doesn't look like he struggles with the cut at all. Ankalaev, on the other hand, did look a little bit drained on the scale. He is a big 205er, but he does look like he cuts much more weight than Walker. If anyone has the size advantage here, it's definitely Walker. As you can see, he looks to be the stronger, taller, and more physically imposing fighter. I'm definitely leading Walker in this matchup at the plus 285 number. And overall, I like what I'm seeing from the face-off from Walker. In our co-main event, we have Khamzat Chimaev going against Kamaru Usman. Khamzat at the ceremonial weigh-ins, as you can see, he has ginormous traps. He is absolutely huge at middleweight. He was one of the biggest welterweights I've seen on the roster in a long time. I don't understand how he made that weight. And he still looks to compete and be a big 185er. Usman, on the other hand, was not by any means a small welterweight. Looked like his cut was pretty easy, as he would be making 170 on short notice, I believe. So making 185 was an easy test for him. In terms of how these two match up, Khamzat definitely has the size advantage and definitely has the height advantage. I'm really interested to see how Usman's wrestling holds up against Chimaev in this fight. I think that will be the telltale sign within the first 2 minutes of the fight. If he can stuff the takedowns and keep those on the feet, it will be competitive. But if not, it will not be competitive. As you can definitely see, Chimaev has a way bigger back than Usman, and that's saying a lot because Usman is a really, really, really jacked fighter. Overall, Chimaev wins this face-off. He looks intimidating. Usman looks a little bit scared, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Chimaev does in that first round. And for our final fight of the night, the main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Islam Makhachev. Volkanovski taking this on 12 days' notice. It makes sense why he doesn't have a complete six-pack. He might have needed to cut a little bit more of his muscle than fat this time just to make the weight. It's important to note that this fight is in Abu Dhabi because of the rehydration clause they have there. This allows Islam a lot more time to recover from his cut. Per usual, Islam looked like a mess on the scales, but not as big as a mess as last time. He's always sucked out. He is a complete weight bully in there, and he definitely had time to recover and rehydrate here. He's definitely the much bigger man in terms of thickness, in terms of height, in terms of range. I'm definitely worried for Volkanovski in this spot on short notice, and given that he doesn't look to be in the best shape possible. And that about wraps it up for the weigh-in analysis. If you want more in-depth info and our entire betting breakdown, our Patreon link is in the bio for the MMA Minute. And until next time.